This is the Persistence of Vision podcast.
Okay, so the big question is, Karen, if we should start talking first about our theater experiences or experiences in making a James Bond movie. Where do you want to start?
Let's not start it with a James Bond movie. No, we can start wherever you want. You talk about things that you wish or you're glad are not out there in the digital format.
I have told this to so many people. I am so glad that YouTube and social media did not exist when I was making movies, because I would have uploaded all that stuff
That's right.
and would be totally embarrassed now.
We all would be.
Yeah, it would just be terrible. So that was a bit of a cold open, so I'm going to have to back up a little bit for the listener. But my guest for this month's podcast episode is Karen Kizzire, and she is in the advertising industry. And so when I saw Karen's post on Facebook about a recent commercial shoot she was on in the scorching heat and the Alabama beaches, I said, well, you know what? Let's get the advertising agency perspective. And Karen and I go way back to college, in our college theatrical days, and then she was gracious enough to be a supporting Bond girl.
I was typecast.
Yeah, I needed a real sultry, sexy woman to be in this Bond movie, and who should be sitting across from me in my theater class. But it was always doing those Bond movies. I did 2 of those Bond movies, believe it or not, when I was in high school and college. And it was a really good excuse to get together with some really attractive girls.
I don't know about that. I mean, I guess back then, yeah, I probably was.
Karen, you and I were just saying before we started recording how it's been so long since we've actually had the chance to chat and catch up, that I'm afraid that this episode might just be plenty of inside baseball for the listeners, and we'll try to put a nice little bow on it and give some sort of life lessons or something. Right. We'll figure out what we're doing. I try to get everybody to just start off and introduce themselves professionally. So who are you and what do you do?
I'm Karen Kizzire. I work for Lucky & Company Advertising here in Birmingham. We have offices in Birmingham and in Duluth. I've been with Lucky on and off for 22 years, and I'm the head of production there. So I oversee all of our video content production, social media, radio, corporate videos, things like that. But as head of production, I mean, I really oversee our full production department, all of our editors. And then we also have a, print production side in our department. So, I kind of oversee everything, but my real day-to-day is the video production and radio production.
So let's back up a little bit. Just curious to know what led you into the advertising field. Where did that interest come from?
Well, I mean, at Alabama, I went to the University of Alabama and I majored in public relations and I minored in theater. So my real dream was to do marketing and PR for some sort of, arts related group, whether it was a local theater or, the Alabama Symphony or the Alabama Ballet. I wanted to be involved in the arts. And out of college, I was offered a job with a company called Vazda Studios, and they were a production and post-production company here in Birmingham. And I had no idea that commercials were produced in Birmingham. That just seemed like a bigger city kind of thing. And so I started there as an executive assistant, and it was there that I went on my first commercial production shoot, and I just kind of became in love with production on that shoot. I had no idea it took 10 to 12 hours to create a 30-second television commercial. And I think there was something about it. I mean, you talked about we made movies together and film projects in college. There was something about it. It kind of felt like being on a small movie set, and it felt like I was kind of still involved in the arts and that creative environment, being on that set. And so I kind of fell in love. And so I worked there for 2 years and I worked my way up, and then I left there and went to Lucky in 2001. And I started over as a production assistant, and over the next 2 decades, I moved up in the agency until now I'm head of production.
I think you and I are very similar in the sense that you used your theater minor as a way to kind of support and inform what you wanted to do for your career. And I did the same thing. Like I knew that I wanted to be in film production and video production. So I used my theater minor in the same way to learn how to, talk with actors and work with actors and kind of put myself in their shoes. And,
That's right.
and of course, that's how you and I met. And I'm trying to think, we were just chatting before we got started as to when exactly we met. And it was in some theater class. And at this point now, I can't remember which one it was.
It was probably like acting one or something like that.
Yeah.
That first acting class that you take in the theater department.
Yeah, because I remember some of those theater classes were so great because I remember having one like late in the afternoon where sometimes we get to do some relaxation exercises
Yes.
and some breathing exercises and stretches. And I just remember lying on the floor and our instructor coming around and just like stretching
Stretching
everyone's
our
neck.
neck.
And I just remember because that was like a 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. start time to that class. And I just remember thinking, oh, this feels fantastic. It was so relaxing.
There have been so many times in my life that I wish that that professor would come and stretch my neck, especially now that I'm so much older. I'm like, yes, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
that was great.
those neck stretches were wasted on 19-year-olds.
They really were.
We need them now. So that's really cool. I wanted to kind of stick on the theater topic for a second because who doesn't love a good like theatrical nightmare story? And I don't know if I actually have a few from when I was a stage manager for a show that we did, but I wanted to see if you have any nightmare theater stories off the top.
Well, I was the props coordinator for one of the shows that we did. And the poor actor, he had to eat all of these random foods. Like there's this scene, I mean, he's doing this wild chaotic scene where he's serving this master over here and he's serving this master over here I mean, again, my age is showing because I don't entirely recall, but I just know he had to like run off stage and grab a dish and come on and eat it and hand it to somebody. And he was delivering all of these lines. And so, I would just go to like the little corner store right there on campus and just get these, little ravioli packets or beef stew or whatever, because there was all these random dishes and things that he had to eat and we had no microwave. And that poor guy, but I would always forget until like 2 hours before showtime. Oh yeah, I've got to go get all this food. Why I didn't just buy it all at one time. But I mean, again, that's probably more a nightmare for him than it is for me. But I look back on that now and I'm like, the torture I put that poor actor through having to eat these really bad, like Dinty Moore beef stew, or like Chef Boyardee ravioli and things like that. I mean, just like not taking seriously my role in that show. It was by far one of the best times of my life doing theater at Alabama.
I was the stage manager for that show because my nightmare story was going to be that same show where he had to eat like a custard kind of
Yeah,
like a layered
trifle.
pudding trifle. Yes. And it was a huge dish, but there was like a
Pedestal,
glued on pedestal underneath
and it broke.
that when he set it down, just the glass shattered it. And then I remember one time he had this monologue towards the end of an act, and it was just him on stage, and the lights were supposed to go just a blackout. And now cue the blackout from the booth, and nothing is happening, no blackout. He's standing there for a second, and it's like, well, and he's like, and just kind of jogs off stage. And then I'm like, what is going on? And realized that I had forgotten to turn the work lights back off
Mm.
after intermission.
I mean, I guess I really owe you an apology for being such a terrible props coordinator.
Well, I wasn't going to throw you under the bus because I don't remember who it was that had to put I don't remember if it was you that had, because you handled the food,
Mhm.
but I don't remember exactly who it was that was handling the dishes, the props that the food went into.
I think that was somebody else. I did one time. I took a elbow to the nose during a like little fight scene in one of the shows that I was in. I was in a show called Sylvia, and I'm getting into this fight with the other female performer in the show, and I took an elbow to the nose, and we had to finish that. And I'm sitting there the whole time wondering, like, am I bleeding? Do I have my two front teeth? I mean, I was supposed to grab her by the arms and she's supposed to turn around, and it just, in the moment, it just kind of went berserk, and she just, boom, popped me right in the nose. And it was, we had to finish out that scene, and I'm kind of seeing stars like, ugh. But thankfully that was like right before intermission. So when the lights went out, I mean, I went straight to a mirror like, do I still have my two front teeth? I did.
I've always said there's just something about a theater experience. And of course, mine was only in high school and college. I have not done any theater since then. But there's just something about it that I think teaches you a lot about working with people and collaboration. I'm just curious, like, what do you think it taught you? I mean, it could just, for you, it could have just been a really fun time and a great memory. But just curious to know if anything really has stuck with you that you think about today.
Oh yeah. I mean, it absolutely is that collaborative environment. It's a shared experience. I think there's nothing more exciting than live theater because, you go to a live show, you are literally getting a once in a lifetime performance because, people think these shows go on tour, they, are on Broadway for months on end, years, and it's just the same thing over and over and over. It's not. Actors make choices, and mistakes happen, and you're sitting here in the middle of this show, and maybe the lights don't go out and you've got to improv to finish out the scene, or you take an elbow to the face. I mean, you can rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, but until you're like up there on stage, and it's happening live, you don't really know what's going to happen, and there's something really exhilarating about that. So there's by far a shared experience that you have. I mean, I think it definitely taught me to step outside it like it does anybody, your comfort zone. I mean, you're standing up on a stage and you're vulnerable and you're acting, and people may like it, they may hate it. There's a real vulnerability about doing it. It taught me a lot about, respect for my director, and responsibility to your other actors, coming to set prepared, and or to your rehearsal prepared, and knowing your lines and knowing your blocking, and all of those things. So I mean, there's a lot of life lessons that you learn, and you learn to trust. You learn to trust the people that you're working with, and they have to learn to trust you. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really valuable lessons, and I think that's why the arts are so important and why I'm so passionate about them. It's there's a lot of really great things, and kids from all walks of life and all experiences can find a place to belong. And I was a really kind of like straight-laced normal girl, I feel like, to be in theater. There, I wasn't very very artsy, I wasn't very imaginative in my own opinion. I just liked theater, and so even for some boring girl like me, I found a place to belong.
It's so funny you say that because when I first met you, like, you never struck me as kind of this boring, run-of-the-mill, straight-laced person. Like, I mean, there were things that I'm not going to say it on this podcast, but there were some things that you would say to me backstage or do backstage, and I'm just like wide-eyed, like, what? And like, oh, okay, Karen, you
Well,
know.
it was all about the shock value back then. It was the 90s.
I may have to just talk to you about that offline to see if you remember any of that stuff. But yeah, just listening to you talk about theaters makes me want to go and sign up for an improv class or something just to get back and do something like that.
We have people at the agency who do that.
Oh
They
yeah,
they
I've got coworkers that do it too.
Yeah, and they say it is really helpful to them. And these are people that do a lot of pitches, and
Hmm.
they're in a lot of these meetings where they're pitching to new business clients, or even existing clients pitching work. So yeah, we've had people that have taken those improv classes, and I imagine it is helpful. You
For
learn some
sure.
tools, that help you think on your feet, and respond in the moment, and um,
Yeah, I think for me, theater did wonders for me in regards to that. Just being able to think on my feet, to communicate ideas effectively, to basically read a room, and because you're taught when you're on stage, it's not acting, it's reacting, and you're taught to really listen to other people and stuff like that. And then all the things you were saying earlier about, every night being somewhat different and pivoting when things go wrong and making intentional choices. And I'm kind of nodding along as you saying that, like that's exactly what production is, right?
Oh,
The
absolutely.
creative field, the arts. It's just constant pivoting and reimagining things when things don't quite go the way you expected them to go.
I think deep down, there's just always been in me like this desire to create, to do things, and definitely to be around, you know, the movies, so to speak. I mean, I started at Alabama wanting to be a theater major. And then when I took my first acting class, I was like, I'm not as good as these other people. So I quickly switched it to a minor. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always just kind of been in me to want to do something, in that area.
I tell you, one of the coolest classes I took in theater was the sound design class, where you got the chance to really build the world in sound.
Hmm.
Uh, and I loved that, and still to this day will use some of the things I learned in that class about, building a sound bed for some video I'm working on or something, creating an environment with sound.
Hmm. Yeah. And in that same practicum semester, I was the lighting person, and I didn't design the lights. I just ran the lights for a really fun show that had, I mean, just a couple hundred lighting cues. I mean, it was a wild light, just lighting show. And and that was so much fun. How the lights would just completely transform a scene, and and I became fascinated with that, and I still am. When we're on set, I mean, I love to watch our crew light a scene and just the little tweaks that they make to just change a shadow, or day to night kind of things outside. It's just it's fascinating, and I loved doing that when I was in theater.
So, did you have mentors early on in your career that really stuck with you? Some things that they taught you, or things that you said, "Oh, okay, this is something I can really hold on to and apply down the road."
Yeah, I mean, the greatest mentor, I've had two really fantastic mentors, both at Lucky. My first boss there was a woman named Janice Rogan. She was such a delight to work for. She was a mom, and had, when I started working for her, she had a son in high school, a daughter in middle school, and a daughter in elementary school. And I was just getting married, and and as I worked for her, I went on to have two children of my own. And I just looked at her, and how she could balance it all. And so just on a personal level, she was such a mentor to me. But on a professional level, for me, it was how she treated people, how she worked with people. She was always so kind. No one could say anything bad about Janice. She was just always such a delight to work for. And she was a producer. She was head of production. I would just watch her when she was planning for a shoot, and I didn't get to be on set with her ever, just because of what my role was versus her role, and the way things were way back then. But I worked with her in the office and saw how she treated people, and I never saw her frazzled. And for a producer, for you to never see him frazzled, it's pretty impressive. And she was just, a strong Christian woman. She was just everything that I wanted to be. And we also had a freelance producer named Mike Lagatuda, who worked with us for, gosh, 20 years. And he was tough as nails, but had a heart. He has a heart of gold. He really does. I credit him for giving me my toughness. I credit Janice for giving me my grace, and so I hope between the two of them, maybe I've amounted to some sort of decent producer. But I remember the first time I was going to be able to produce my own spots. I looked at Mike, and I started to ask him all these questions, and he looked at me. He said, "Kid, it's sink or swim." And that was it. I knew he was not going to give me any advice, no guidance, no. He I think if it had really come down to it, he probably would have helped me out, but he knew that I was ready. I'd been there for 12 years when I finally got my opportunity to produce my first television spots. And he knew I could do it. I just didn't know that I could do it.
I thought it was interesting what you just said about like you were 12 years in, when you found your opportunity to produce on your own. So what was that like for you, like waiting for that opportunity and kind of paying your dues and kind of, what that taught you, or maybe there were some frustrations you felt along the way, like when am I going to get my shot? Maybe how you dealt with all that.
Yeah, I mean, so I started at Lucky as a production assistant, and so I assisted both the print and the broadcast side, and so I helped with both of those. And whenever we had shoots in Birmingham, I would find a way to get onto set just to see what was going on and things like that. But at this time, this was back in the day when you had $1 million budgets and everybody was shooting out in LA all the time. I mean, if you were shooting a big project, you were shooting it out in LA. And I know they had the money for it. And I would ask, please let me go, Mike, please let me go. And he's like, nope, don't have the money, don't have the money. And, it was frustrating. And then in 2010, I did get to go on my first big national commercial shoot out in LA. And that experience was something that I will never forget because it was so big and there were so many people. And the producer for the production company, I guess she caught wind, or maybe I'd said at, our big client dinner that we had the night before we started shooting, that this was my first shoot. She got me up. She walked me around. She pointed everybody out on that set. She took the call list and she said, this is who the gaffer is. And she pointed him out. She told me who he is. This is who the key grip is. And she pointed him out. And this is who the best boy is. And she pointed out every single person and told me what every single one of those roles did. And I will never forget that. And I do that to this day. If we have young people, new people, interns, people at the agency that are going on their first shoot, and it's not anywhere near as big as that shoot was, I will walk around with them and show them what they're looking at because it gives purpose to who all these people are. It helps them understand this department works and does this department works and does this, and this is how they interact. And this, I appreciated that so much because if she had not done that for me, who knows when I would have ever figured out who all those 40 people are. But it was an education that I greatly valued. And so I try to pass that on.
That's one of the reasons that I knew I needed to kind of pivot a little bit for me personally, because I was working as a set PA for a long time and then kind of realized, oh my goodness, I'm not going to have the luxury of that. Like, I'm not going to have somebody that has the time to take me by the hand and say, here's what everybody does, or let me show you a little thing or two about this particular job. Because everything was moving so quickly, there just wasn't enough time. But I did feel fortunate that I did have an opportunity to learn a little bit about, okay, here's when you're shooting on film, and you have video playback back in the day, like I did that. So I got to learn how to run video playback for the director at Video Village. Or I got the chance to, one time I actually got the chance to be a dolly grip, so I'm just pushing the dolly back and forth on the track for each take. And so I kind of learned a little bit here and there about what each role is and what each role does. And I think I wish now that as I look back on it, that I'd asked more questions at the time, not been afraid to say, hey, tell me a little bit more about that.
I mean, you are afraid when you're new on set. I mean, and that was the first thing she said. She was like, you always want to know where the camera is. That's the first thing you always want to know is where is the camera, because you don't want to walk in front of it. It's like you don't want to mess up what's happening. I mean, we were in the middle of a peach orchard in some desert in LA, and you had to walk like half a mile into this peach orchard. And this thing went on forever. I mean, it was huge. And, it was like, so, just knowing where the camera is so you don't like walk down the wrong aisle of peaches to getting from, going back to use the restroom or something and coming back onto set, to go back to your original question though, about like how it was waiting. that being my first big experience and her taking all of that time with me, it was like the wait was worth it, because not only did I get to go on like this really huge shoot, I got this really great education at the same time.
Yeah. So then when you finally got the chance to produce something on your own and kind of sink or swim, as you said, what was just that first big lesson that you can remember? Oh, okay, this is how I need to do it for the next time. I've learned something here.
Yeah. So it was 3 years later. So I waited another 3 years to produce my first spot. And yes, so I was driving up. We were shooting in Nashville. I was driving up, and the creative team was already up there. They had a meeting with the client up there. And so I was driving up for our tech scout and our pre pro that was the next day. And I forget the details of it, but I got a very angry call from my creative director and was like, why does the client know something? I forget again what it was, but it was the client knew something that he didn't know in regards to the shoot. And I was like, oh, well, I was waiting till I got the pre-production book to blah, 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 blah. And he just let into me, like I should know everything that's going on. It was, that was a big learning lesson to me, that you can never over communicate, because I was just waiting for all my little ducks to get in a row. And then I was going to share everything out to the creative team. And I guess maybe I had discussed something with, someone on the account team. I forget how the wires got crossed, but it was by far me just waiting for everything to get all buttoned up, and then I was going to deliver this beautiful pre-pro book to my creative team. And and that was my first lesson of like, you just can't over communicate in this job. But after all of these years, there's rarely been a big production that I've done that I haven't learned something new, because it's not a one size fits all. They're all unique. It's you're always learning something, and sometimes you learn the same thing twice. You hope not to, but but there's a lot. It's a big job, and there's a lot to be done, and you're a human, and you're going to make a mistake. And I've had to come to terms with that too, my own humanness, because I'm very, very hard on myself. I don't like to make mistakes. I don't like to disappoint people. And I don't want to disappoint my team, because they're putting their trust in you. So yeah, there's there's always a lesson to be learned.
Yeah, I can remember when I was casting for a particular shoot, and the casting wasn't quite coming together like we had envisioned it. So we had to swap some things around. And it was just like a background player. And this big question came up, like, well, why wasn't I notified that this had been changed? Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't this in the pre-production book? So to your point, like, of over communicating, it's at the time I was thinking, well, it's not really going to impact the shoot all that much. The action remains the same, but still the lesson was like, okay, let's just make sure everybody knows everything that's happening, so there's just no questions and no surprises across the board. But when you're talking about how you just like to please people and make sure that your crew is taken care of, like, I can really relate to that, because I don't know if you're the same way as I am, but I have a real problem with replaying my mistakes, and letting those mistakes fester in my mind, even weeks and sometimes even months later. Something will happen and it'll trigger a memory of some mistake that I made, or how somebody was upset with me or whatever. And that's a real struggle for me, is replaying those mistakes in my head and having a really difficult time like getting over it.
Yeah, I there have been plenty of times that I've said really dumb things and just put my foot in my mouth, and it's like, just that, it's like a meme almost, just like, oh, oh gosh, why did I say that? And I mean, I think with age and maturity, I've learned to kind of let those things roll. But when I was much younger and much more inexperienced and really trying to prove myself, I took myself so seriously in everything that I did. And so yeah, I would really just focus hard on every bad, wrong thing that I did, and just wanting people to see me, like see my effort, see, what I'm doing. And that's another lesson that I had to learn is, it can be a thankless job. It can, being a producer can be a really thankless job. And, just not doing it for the accolades and the, pats on the back, instead just doing it because you love it and you love the people that you're doing it with and doing it for, and just letting that be the motivator and not the praise of it all. I had to come to terms with that too. There's the old joke that when the shoot goes well, everyone congratulates the director, but when things are going poorly, they blame the producer. And I'm like, that's really true. But it's okay, because I get that warm feeling inside. No, I'm just kidding. That I did something good today. No, it really is something that you just over time have to come to terms with, what your role is, what it isn't, and just being okay with it.
So when you mentioned earlier about your experiences working with your creative director, when you had that lesson of, hey, there's no such thing as over communication, I'm just curious from your perspective as a producer, someone who is on the front lines of working from the agency side with someone on the production side, a director and a crew, then working with a client to ensure that what they get is something that they'll approve. Talk to me about that, what you've learned about that working relationship, that dynamic specifically maybe between the director on the production side and the creative director on the agency side.
Yeah, it's a really interesting position to be in, especially since I am employed by the agency. So, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I always feel like um, I hate to use the term loyalty, but my responsibility is to my creative team and to our client. But at the same time, I'm also the liaison over here to the production company and trying to maintain a great working relationship with them because you want your shoot to go smoothly. And there's always going to be those times when your creative team or the writer or the art director or the creative director don't see eye to eye with the director. They're both creative minds. The director's a creative mind, and you hired him for that reason, for the creativity that he's supposed to bring to this project. And your creative team is a creative mind, and this is their idea, this is their concept. It's precious to them. And so yeah, I mean, there's going to be times that on set they don't see eye to eye, or I've been on set when the director's like, I don't think we need to shoot that anymore. Like it was boarded or it was in his shooting boards. We talked about it in pre-pro, and he's like, now that we're here, I don't think we need to shoot that anymore. And having the client be more disappointed about that after the fact than really the creative team. I mean, it's a delicate balance. It's a dance that you really learn to perfect over time. But I've never had a director just be a straight up jerk about anything. I can't say. I mean, I've had some be pretty vocal, and I even had one that used a bullhorn to communicate, which was fantastic. That was the first shoot that I ever did. I thought that's what directors did. I thought they all carried a bullhorn and yelled
We
at.
all have, yeah, we all have ascots at the ready.
I mean, he like straight up would just yell things through the bullhorn. But I mean, I always think the best thing is to like, if it really looks like it's going to get heated, is to take it offset, away from the client, away from everyone else, and let's find a quiet place and discuss it all together. Because you don't want to see the whole thing start to break down right in front of everybody. And I always talk to my creative team first, and and really listen, to what the issue is, and what the frustration is, and then I will call in the producer on the production company side, and say, hey, we've got to stop, we've got to have a talk.
But it's difficult. You don't want to play that card either.
No, you
You
don't.
can't.
I mean,
Yeah, because I'm coming from the production side of
mhm.
things, and I know how I feel as a
Yep.
director. It's tough because I wouldn't want somebody on the creative side to kind of lay down the law, so to speak, and
No.
say this is the way we're doing it. Because, like you said, you've hired the director, and so there has to be some sort of give and take and some sort of input.
And sometimes
Um,
it's, hey, let's shoot it your way, let's shoot it our way.
sure.
And then whatever works best in the edit's what we use. And sometimes that's the solution.
Yeah,
Um,
my go-to is always, let's try it. I hear what you're saying. That sounds good. Let's give it a go.
And that's the sign of a good director. And that's why I can't really say that I've had too many situations where it's like just been a stonewall, because most directors, they are collaborative, and they aren't going to just, you know, well, this is my set and blah 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 blah, because they want to work again too.
Sure.
And a lot of times we work with the same directors again. Sometimes we don't. But yeah, I mean, I've mostly found directors to have that same attitude. Let's try it.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing when you say about you've got to maintain good word of mouth. I mean, you've got to maintain a good reputation, because I spent, 10 plus years as a freelancer full time. And, that was one of the biggest fears I had, was that, oh my goodness, if word gets out that I have some sort of difficult reputation, then that's it. No one's ever going to want to hire me again.
Well, and the same is true with the ad agency. I mean, like, I've made mistakes in bidding projects and working through that process, that I've had people be like, It's obvious they don't ever want to hear from us again,"
Yeah.
and so it goes both ways. We want to maintain a good reputation, and be known as good people to work with, and it goes both ways. I've even learned, sometimes my creative team wants to hear my creative voice, and they respond, when I make suggestions about things. I spent a long time thinking that I was, strictly sort of that business functional role, and but I've learned to speak up on set. We do in-house production as well. So I'm not just an agency producer. We have a DP, director, employed by Lucky, and so we will do our own in-house productions too. And so in those times, I work as the line producer and the production coordinator
Mhm.
and the casting director. Like, I do all of the things. So, again, and I think it probably goes back to, working for Janice. I never want to treat people, any different than I would want to be treated in that same position, because I know what they're dealing with. I know all of the things they're balancing. I know all of the people that they're coordinating with, and all of the headaches of, it's like a house of cards. You make one little change, and, things can go really, crazy in a second in production. And so when I'm acting as that side of production, it's hard. And so, whenever we have outside production companies that we're working with, I I always treat those producers with just the utmost respect, because it's a hard job, and they don't always get that. I know what you're going through, because we do this internally too, and big shoots. I mean, we just did a $900,000 shoot for a client internally, and so it's not small work that we're doing. And so it's I have a very interesting perspective, because I do both sides of it.
It's fortunate and it's great to hear that people are looking to you for creative input as well. But I was just wondering if there was a time that maybe you struggled with people kind of thinking of you more in that producer business only, stay in your lane. Was there any kind of struggle through that when you were trying to kind of, as a creative person yourself, to kind of speak up and find your voice to kind of throw your opinions in there?
I don't think so, because I mean, really, the people that I work with are very nice. They're very kind people. I mean, we have our moments, and we have our arguments, and we have, you work with people for so long, they become more like family. And so we will talk very honestly with one another. I mean, I technically fall within the creative department in the agency, so I guess everybody, it's okay if I speak up. But I'm fine to stay in my lane. But if I see on camera that something is really wrong in the shot, I will speak up, because sometimes people aren't paying it. Like, I'm really good at the little small details. I mean, that's 100% of my job, is to pay attention to the details. And so if I'm sitting in Video Village and I'm looking at, our client monitor, and I'm like, oh, his tie is wrong, or there's a weird hair floating off her head, or, I will speak up because there's no reason to shoot and then speak up later. I've learned that too. If you see something, say it right away, because there's no point in wasting time and having to go back and reshoot things.
Sure.
Um,
Or there's an agency intern wandering through the peach orchard in the background
right,
there that's in the shot, and we need to get her
right
out of
in the middle of
there.
the shot.
Yeah. I'm just going to the bathroom.
So I'm very fortunate, the creative teams that I get to work with, they appreciate the extra set of eyes because they're they're focusing on different things. And I think they know it's all in an attempt to make the best work possible.
Mhm.
And so anybody that's going to hold their work too tightly and not know and understand that when someone says something like me that's not really in the creative team, so to speak, it she must mean it when she says it. Like there's a reason. Like, I don't just speak up to speak up. It's like, no, you really want to fix that man's tie because it looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or you're shooting this wrong. Y'all wanted them to say this and they're saying this instead. So, I think they're appreciative of the extra set of eyes and ears.
Yeah, I remember when I was working as an assistant camera on a reality show. I happened to be at Video Village as they were shooting, and I can see that the character in the scene that they're shooting all of a sudden has sunglasses on, and they just shot something with him without sunglasses, and the director's right there, and I'm like, oh my goodness, do I say something? And like, no one's saying anything, and I'm like tapping him on the shoulder, like trying to be as, because at least you're a producer, you're in that role, and I'm like, he didn't have sunglasses on in the last shot, and he whips around like, what, like, who's speaking to me? And I was like, he didn't have sunglasses. Oh yeah, take your sunglasses off. So yeah, I don't know if he appreciated that or not, but I was like, I cannot let this go.
Well, and I've also like been in Video Village and not been privy to the conversation happening on set where they said, "Hey, let's try it with the sunglasses on." And I would come in, I mean, not the same scenario, but like the same kind of situation. I've come in and said, "Hey, that wasn't like that before." And they're like, "We know, we're doing it different." And so
That's
it's like you have to learn like not to, take things too, because it is a high it's very tense, and it can be a very tense environment. And so you just learned, okay, and just walk
yeah.
away.
That's because you were just hanging out at craft services the whole time and
I
didn't
mean,
really
pretty
know what was
much.
going on. Or like
That's all a producer does once they get to
coming
set.
in with a mouthful of Danish. Oh, that wasn't that way
I
before.
don't think that looks good.
You said earlier that production is a lot like a house of cards, and things can just kind of topple over in any second. So I was just curious if there's any elaboration to that statement, any specifics that you can think of in your and we can refrain from using names to protect the innocent if you'd like. But if there's anything where like, oh man, this is where everything just toppled over and we had to pivot and do this instead.
I mean, anytime a client wants to change something after you've already kind of set it up, like a location or wardrobe or, anything like that, location being kind of the biggest thing. We had a client that, could never really settle firmly on a location because we had to shoot in they had multiple stores, and it was like, which store of yours are we going to shoot in? And being settled on a location and having gone and done the initial scout and working through things, and then just, what, that's not going to work. Or, hey, you're not actually going to get to shoot until like 10 a.m., but you need like that early morning sun, but you can't, so it's just like when they drop these little mini bombs on you that it's like, okay, well, now we've got to completely change the shoot day schedule. And you want a sunrise set a shot, or you want a sunset shot, and you're saying we can't shoot here, but it's like those little things that they just kind of pull the rug out from under you, and you have to make whatever is coming your way work. But it is one of those things that people think it's a minor ask or a minor change, to just change the time of day that you can get into the store or change the location. It's not minor because it affects actually a whole lot of other different things, and you gotta pivot.
Even to this day, I find it interesting that there are so many people that still don't fully grasp the nuances of production work,
Hmm.
in that regard. That because I'll often, throughout my entire career, when I've rolled into a location and started unloading, inevitably I'll get the comment from a client or someone that says, "Wow, you guys sure do have a lot of stuff." And like, well, yeah, that's how we put these things together and make it look great on the screen is because of what we put into it. Yeah. So, and the fact that there are just so many people that are involved
Or
that,
why
like
it's
you
going to
said,
take you an hour and a half to 2 hours to set up a shot.
yes,
They're like, oh, it's just a simple shot. It's not a simple shot,
yes,
and
yes,
here's why.
yeah, and
It's
there's a
like
little,
you're
yeah,
looking
there's
at a sheet of
definitely,
paper and a script, and you see this board, and you see a simple shot, but everybody else that's having to make that happen sees this little thing and this little thing and this little thing. It's like there's a bunch of little things happening within this one shot. You've got to have, well, they're sitting in a car, so you've got to have a car, and they're holding a phone, so you got to have a phone, and they're holding. It's just like all of these things, and it's like, and that's happened too, where it's like, but could we also do this? When you've already got your whole shoot day planned out, and it's like, oh, but we really need this, and it's like, is this a have to or a would like to? And
yeah.
it's like, oh, it's a have to, and then it just changes everything, and you maybe budgeted for a 10-hour day, and suddenly you're going to have a 12-hour day, and you got to figure out how to work in that overtime. It's just, you're right. I mean, people don't understand all of the things that go into a production and why it takes the level of support to hold it up. And my favorite thing is when people are like, "I just shoot it up with an iPhone." That's my favorite thing. That this commercial was just shot using an iPhone.
Yeah, so when people look at a film like 28 Years Later, the zombie film that came out this year, and they say, "Oh, that was just shot on an iPhone." It's like, yeah, but you don't realize the amount of lensing that was put
Hmm.
on the end of that iPhone and the support crew that
Hmm.
was
And all of the
involved.
lighting, and it
Yes.
still required actors, and it still required, it's like the support, it's not just the camera. It's not That's not the only thing about a production. There's so many people making this look good and sound good and run smoothly, and it's like, I just shoot it with an iPhone.
I think that's where my role as director comes into play when I'm communicating with someone about, okay, I hear what you want to do. Here's your vision. Here's the storyboard. Here's what it's going to take for us to execute this in the fashion that's on this brief. And so I'll explain, like, here's what we'll need to do in order to make this happen, and here's how it affects the budget as a result. Is this still a path that you want to go down? Here's what we need to consider time wise. We now need a full day of prep rather than just a half day of prep. So it's me. It goes back to what we said earlier about the things you learn from theater, about thinking on your feet, about communication, about collaboration, about really being able to read a room and that's what I've taken with me from some of my past experiences. Okay, now I can communicate and say, here's what it's going to take to make this happen. Is this something you still want to do, or do you want to pivot here at this point before we get too far down the road?
Hmm. Yeah, and not understanding, when you said award, when you awarded the job, we started working, and you can't just backtrack on the things that you agreed to when you looked at this bid and looked at this treatment and looked at, all of these things. That bid reflected this creative, it reflected this kind of casting, it reflected this kind of location, and so you've made this change. Well, it's toppled what we're kind of building this house on.
So, for those that might listen to this that are still interested in this kind of a career,
Have I made it sound that terrible?
no, no.
That's really a lot of fun.
Well, you're really putting the icing on the cake here, Karen. No, I was just going to ask, like, because I enjoy mentoring young people. I enjoy teaching them kind of how this industry works and how to do things and things to think about. I've had the chance to mentor some high school students in the past, and just getting them to think about the smallest things about production. Like you watch a movie and someone comes in through the door. Like, okay, how do you shoot that? Where do you put the camera? How are they coming into the room? What angle are you going to use? And then they start to see, oh, there's intentionality behind everything that you see on screen. There's a reason for it. So along those lines, like as you're thinking about your producer role and the experiences that you've had, and if you were to mentor somebody, what type of person does it take to do this producer job? What do they need? And through all these stories, of course, they kind of know what to prepare themselves for. But like for you, what would you tell that young person about what to think about and what to prepare for?
You know, it takes a level head in the middle of chaotic situations. It takes someone that's very thoughtful and organized. It takes somebody who is willing to go the extra mile every day, all the time. It can be a frustrating and difficult job. My kids are always saying, "How was your day?" It's crazy. I mean, I think that's just how I answer it it's crazy. It was good. It was crazy because it's not a normal job. There's nothing that prepares you from day to day what is going to just land on your plate to have to do that day, or what person that you're trying to cast suddenly isn't available, or the director that you really want to hire for this job isn't available during the week that y'all are shooting, and you're trying to move people's schedules around. It requires somebody that can be flexible, and can kind of roll with the punches, and I've really had to develop into that person. I'm not that person by nature. I'm very type A, which probably serves me well a lot in my role because I am so particular and um, so detail oriented. But I've had to learn to be flexible, and to pivot when I need to. Um, I think that's the kind of person that it would take to find enjoyment in this role. And it really is a lot of fun. I mean, you do have to be collaborative. You do have to um, be somebody who can't be right all the time. And you've got to be okay with that. And you do have to take a fair amount of, harsh words. People, they want what they want when they want it, and you do your best to deliver it. And sometimes you have to give bad news, like that's not going to happen the way you wanted it to be, or you don't have the money for that. I call myself the crusher of dreams because I go into all of these internal reviews and I'm like, you don't have the money for that. You can do this, but you don't have the money for that. But so it's like, sometimes you do have to deliver bad news. But you've also got to be somebody that's willing to, it's not no every time, but it's always, well, what can we do? And you need to be somebody that can offer those solutions, those ideas, come alongside your creative team and say, this is what I think you can do. Um, and then go and execute it.
Yeah.
You can't be all talk. You got to go out there and then do it.
And, of course, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast when you're talking about what type of person is suited for this role and how you want those people that come in behind you to succeed as well, is because I saw a Facebook post that you had made when you were on a shoot, down at the beach, and you're kind of keeping it real. Okay, everybody, for those of you that think it's so glamorous to be down here at the beach shooting a commercial, let me tell you exactly how it is and how my days are going. And I said, you know what? Karen's would be perfect for this podcast.
Well, I shared, a picture from the front porch of this little cottage that we were staying in, and people were like, "Oh, work seems so hard." I was like, "Hold on." I was trying to plug this really great little place in case you're ever in the area and want to stay here. Actually, it is quite hard because I'm working desperately to make sure that everybody is happy and getting what they want, and it's looking exactly the way they want, and our clients are happy and our creatives are happy and the production team is happy, and it and you're doing it in 100-degree heat, and you're on your feet all day, and you're eating bad food, and I mean, it's just like it's not as glamorous as it was in 2010 when I got to go to LA, I'll tell you that.
So when you speak about the fact that, budgets aren't what they used to be and these shoots are not what they used to be, you mentioned earlier about everything used to be shot in LA and you had all these big budgets.
Mhm.
So just from somebody that's in the advertising world now and has been around the advertising industry for as long as you have, what is the state of advertising now? How do you see it? And I guess should advertisers be hitting the panic button right now?
No, I don't think advertisers should be hitting the panic button. There's always going to be messaging that has to get out. There's always going to be products that people want to know about, things that are going to be sold, and competition between different brands, to get their product out to the masses. I don't think advertisers have anything to worry about. Um, but the way those messages get out is vastly different than it used to be. When I started in advertising at the agency in 2001, I mean, we were still shooting on film. Now there's so much more social media, and that you had those big budgets because you had these huge media budgets to support all of that money that you were going to invest in these commercials. And, I feel like I'm busier now than I've ever been. We had 5 shoots going on from May to July. And, gone are the days where an advertiser would shoot one big campaign and that's what they would show all year. Now they're doing it quarterly, or they're doing it monthly, or because things move so much faster, but content still has to get out there. It's just the way that it's out there, how long it's out there. You know, Ads don't have the same life that they used to. So I it's definitely changed, and because they don't have those large media budgets like they used to, they're not going to invest as much in a big commercial shoot. So it has moved to more of that smaller social and digital presence. And I mean, we still shoot big budget stuff, but not for everybody, and so there's always going to be messaging, and people love video content. I mean, they love it. And you have things like TikTok, and all these social media platforms that video is the king of it. And so I think you have to shift, the way you view how you're going to get your messaging out, who you're talking to now. As different generations come into their own and start buying things and making the choices with how they're going to spend their money and spend their time, you learn to talk to those people differently. So I think it's a really exciting time to be in advertising. Actually, it's changing constantly, and of course with AI, that's changed the way agencies are doing some of their operations. And we have an AI person on our executive committee now. So it's going to happen to you, or it's going to happen for you, and so you've got to figure out a way to make it work to yours and your client's advantage. So yeah, I think it's a really cool time to be in advertising, but it's not like it used to be, and that's okay. I think it's still exciting and fun, and um, I think anybody would do well to want to get into this industry.
So as a creative person, what is it that inspires you?
I recently started taking pottery classes. My oldest daughter, went to college last fall, and I found myself with a lot of, I think, nervous energy just having her out there doing her thing. And now I'm suddenly, have one child in the home instead of two. And so I was like, what can I do? I need a project. And so I started taking pottery classes, and I've found that it's really, I mean, because I am so type A, and pottery is, clay is going to do what it's going to do, and you can guide it and you can try to help it, but it has a mind of its own. And it's really I've had to really learn how to sort of let go and let the clay just be, and not be so hard on myself, because I am a perfectionist, and those little imperfections in it mean that it's handmade and it's special and it's one of a kind. I love so many things that are creative. I love music. I love, um, you know, just anything where you can kind of express what's inside, whether that's good or bad. And so I guess I've gotten a lot of anxious feelings out on my pottery, and it shows. My pottery looks anxious.
Well, Karen, you've been super gracious and generous with your time. This has been awesome. I think this is going to be a really I think it's going to be an insightful episode, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. I've loved catching up with you. I was delighted when you asked me to be a part of this. I've just loved it.
And that was my conversation with my good friend Karen Kizzire. It was so awesome having the opportunity to catch up with her after several years. She and I have been connected on social media for a while, but it was just nice to sit down and have a conversation and learn a little bit more about her background, her career, her experiences, a lot of which I didn't even know myself, because you know how it is. You have friends in high school or college or in your early 20s, and then over the years you have families, you move away, and life just gets in the way, and sometimes you lose contact. So it was nice to get back in touch with her. I think it's great to be able to hear from others that are not just filmmakers, not just video production professionals, but also people like Karen who come from an agency side of things and have that perspective as well. As always, be sure to head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you download podcasts, and leave a review for this show so that others will find it. You can connect with me at linktree.com/ClintTill. That's where you can find everything that I'm doing online. If you'd like to read more of the stories that I'm sharing at Persistence of Vision, you can check that out at clinttill.substack.com. And if you'd like to be a future guest on the show and you have a great story to share and some insights about your own creative career, I really hope that you will reach out. You can go to clinttill.net/contact and tell me all about it right there. Thanks again for listening this month. This has been the Persistence of Vision podcast.